I stayed alone at my uncle's lake house for one night because it was going on the market, and somebody had to clean it out before the realtor came. It was late July, hot even after sunset, and the place had that stale, closed-up smell old houses get when nobody has used them in a while. The house sat back from the road with trees on both sides and the lake behind it. Once it got dark, there were no nearby lights except one cabin across the water. I spent the evening filling trash bags, wiping down counters, and carrying boxes to my car. I locked the front door before I took the last load out. When I came back, the kitchen door was standing open. I stopped in the doorway and just stared at it. I knew I had shut it. I remember pulling it until the latch caught because the frame swelled in the heat and it never closed easily. I told myself I'd been moving too fast and left it cracked. I went in, locked it again, and checked every room. The house was small. One bedroom, one bunk room, one bathroom, one open living area facing the lake. Nobody there. I kept cleaning, but after that I noticed little things. A cupboard I had closed was open again. The bathroom light was on when I was sure I had turned it off. I found an empty water bottle in the trash with the cap twisted back on tight. I had been drinking canned soda all evening. By 10, I was tired enough to stop caring. I took a shower, changed clothes, and stretched out on the bed in the back bedroom with my phone beside me. Service out there came and went. I had one bar if I held the phone near the window. Around midnight, I heard weight on the deck outside. Not fast, not sneaking. Just slow pressure on old boards, one step at a time, stopping right outside the bedroom wall. I held my breath and listened. Another step, then silence. I slid off the bed and crouched below the window. The blinds were thin and brittle. I lifted one slat and looked out. The deck was empty. I stayed there for at least a minute, looking at the rail, the grill, the dark shape of the picnic table, the faint silver line of the lake beyond it. Nothing moved. Then the handle on the bedroom door turned. It moved gently, like someone was being careful. The door pushed inward about an inch and stopped on the laundry basket I had left beside it. I couldn't move. I couldn't make a sound. The door pressed again, harder this time, then eased shut. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The call failed twice before it started ringing. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered my address and said I thought somebody was in the house. She asked if I could leave. I said the bedroom window faced the deck, and the only other exit was through the living room. Then I heard the floor in the hallway give a long, low creak. The dispatcher kept talking, but I barely heard her. I was staring at the gap under the bedroom door. A shadow passed across it, not quickly. It blocked out the hall light for a second, then moved on. I expected the handle to turn again. It didn't. Instead, I heard something worse. The soft click of the basement door opening. The lake house had a narrow storage basement under half the place. Dirt floor. Low beams. My uncle kept tools and life jackets down there. You could reach it from a door off the kitchen. The person wasn't leaving. They were going down. The dispatcher said deputies were on the way, but it would take time because the house was outside town. She told me to stay locked in. Then my phone screen went black. Dead battery. I had meant to charge it earlier and forgot. I sat in that room for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 40. Time felt broken. I heard nothing from the kitchen, nothing from the deck, just the air vent clicking on and off and my own breathing. Finally, headlights swept across the window. I ran out before the deputies even reached the porch. I was shaking so hard I could barely talk. They searched the house, then the basement, then the property. In the basement they found a flashlight, a blanket, food wrappers, and a 5-gallon bucket in the corner. Somebody had been staying down there for days, maybe longer. There was a milk crate under one vent where they could hear everything in the living room above them. The deputy asked if anything was missing. I said I didn't know yet. The next morning I did. On the kitchen counter next to the sink I had cleaned before bed, there was a Polaroid photo that had not been there the night before. It was a picture of me arriving at the house that afternoon, carrying my first box from the car, taken from inside the tree line. I was alone at my uncle's lake house for 3 nights in July while he was in Ohio helping my cousin move. He told me to feed the dog, water the planters, and keep the place from looking empty. The dog Murphy was old and half-deaf, so he slept through most things. The house sat at the end of a dirt lane with one neighbor across the cove and woods on the other 3 sides. The first night was normal until about 11:30. I was in the kitchen rinsing a plate when Murphy lifted his head from the rug and looked toward the back windows. He didn't bark, he just stared, ears angled forward, body stiff. The deck light was on, and beyond it I could see the dark yard sloping down to the lake. At first I thought he was tracking a raccoon. Then I noticed the canoe. It had been pulled halfway onto shore that afternoon. Now it was floating loose a few feet from the bank, turning slowly in place. I stood there with my hands still in the sink, watching it drift. The rope was gone. I told myself the knot must have slipped, but my stomach tightened anyway. My uncle never tied anything badly. He had spent his entire life around water and treated small mistakes like they were personal insults. I locked the back door, checked the front door, then went upstairs and looked down from the bedroom window. The canoe was still there, bumping softly against the reeds. In the morning, the rope was tied neatly to the dock post. Not loosely, not tossed there, tied in a square knot, clean and tight. I told myself my memory had gotten mixed up. I even laughed about it while making coffee. Murphy stayed near me all day and kept glancing toward the tree line beside the shed. That evening I grilled burgers on the deck. Around sunset I saw someone in a small fishing boat crossing the far end of the lake. He was too far away to make out. I watched him because there was nothing else to look at. Then I realized he wasn't moving across the lake anymore. He was sitting still, facing my shore. I went inside and left the burgers on the plate untouched. By full dark, the boat was gone. I slept with the bedroom door open so I could hear Murphy. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of him whining low in his throat, not loud, more like he was trying not to be heard. I sat up and listened. There was a light under my bedroom door. Not the yellow hall light. A pale moving beam, sliding back and forth across the gap at the bottom. Someone downstairs with a flashlight. I froze. Murphy gave one sharp bark, then another, then went silent. My phone was on the nightstand. I picked it up and called 911 with my thumb shaking so badly I hit the screen twice. While it rang, I heard a cabinet open in the kitchen below me, then another, slow, careful. Somebody searching the house like he had every reason to take his time. The dispatcher whispered for my address. I gave it to her and locked myself in the bathroom attached to the bedroom. I could barely hear her over the pounding in my ears. Then the flashlight beam reached the bedroom. It swept under the bathroom door and paused. I put my hand over my mouth because I could feel myself breathing too hard. The beam moved away. I heard footsteps crossing the bedroom floor, then stopping. Not pacing, just standing there. The dispatcher kept saying, officers were coming from town, that it would take several minutes. I remember staring at the towel bar, the toothpaste on the sink, stupid little things that had nothing to do with the fact that a stranger was in the next room. Then I heard my own bedroom window slide open. A long silence followed. After that, nothing. No footsteps, no doors, no voice. Just night insects outside and Murphy beginning to bark downstairs like he had finally decided it was safe to make noise. Police came 7 minutes later. It felt like an hour. They cleared the house, the yard, the dock, the shed. Nobody. My bedroom window was open, screen removed, and leaning against the siding below. The officer asked if I knew anyone who might mess with me. I said no. He asked if anything was taken. At first I thought nothing was. Then I went into the kitchen. One cabinet stood open. Inside were 6 plates, 4 bowls, and a stack of old plastic cups. Sitting by itself on the counter was a framed photo my uncle kept on a lower shelf because the glass was cracked. It was a picture of me at 12 years old, standing on that same dock in a life vest, holding a bluegill, and smiling with my front teeth too big for my face. The officer asked why that photo had been in the cabinet. I told him it hadn't. He looked at me for a second, then wrote something in his notebook. They found prints on the outside of the upstairs wall and near the dock, but the deputy told me not to expect much. Summer places got prowlers, drunks from the marina, kids, sometimes burglars checking which homes were empty. I packed before sunrise. When I went to put my bag in the car, I noticed Murphy standing at the edge of the yard, staring into the woods beside the shed again. I followed his line of sight and saw a patch of bare dirt under the pines. There were empty beer cans there, cigarette butts, a flattened fast food bag, a clear view of the back deck and the kitchen windows. Someone had been sitting there for a while. I never stayed at the lake house again. My uncle sold it the next spring. I went to the lake house alone in August because my friend Caleb said I could use it while he was in Florida. He kept a small aluminum boat tied to the dock, and the lake behind the place was full of bass in the late afternoon. The house sat back in the trees with one gravel drive, one screened porch, and a long window over the kitchen sink that faced the water. I got there around noon, put my food in the fridge, set my tackle box by the back door, and headed out before the heat got worse. The first few hours were normal. Bluegill kept stealing my bait near the reeds, and I landed 2 small bass by the fallen cedar on the north bank. Around 5, clouds moved in and flattened the light over the lake. The water turned dark enough to reflect the house like glass. That was when I saw someone at the kitchen window. I had drifted about 40 yards off the dock, facing back toward shore while I retied my line. I looked up and saw a man standing inside the house just beyond the sink. He was not doing anything dramatic. He was simply there still, one hand resting on the counter like he belonged in the place. My first thought was that Caleb had come back early and forgotten to tell me. Then the man turned his head and looked straight out at me. Even across the water I could tell he was not Caleb. He was too tall, thin across the shoulders, with a dark shirt and a pale face that stayed fixed at the window long after a normal person would have waved or moved away. I set the rod down and stood up in the boat. The man stepped back out of sight. I waited for him to reappear. He didn't. I started the trolling motor and headed for the dock faster than I wanted to. The whole trip in felt exposed. I kept expecting to see him come out onto the porch or step from the side of the house with one of my bags in his hand. Nothing moved. The trees were still. The screen door on the porch hung shut. When I tied off the boat, I stayed on the dock for a moment and listened. No voices, no footsteps, no engine on the gravel drive. I told myself it could be a neighbor checking on the place, but Caleb would have told me that. He was the kind of person who left notes about where extra batteries were kept. He would not forget to mention another man with a key. I walked up the yard with my fill-in knife in one hand and my phone in the other. No signal. The front door was shut but unlocked. I knew I had locked it before going out because the deadbolt stuck unless you lifted the handle, and I remembered doing that. Inside, the air felt cooler than it should have. The kitchen looked mostly the same, except the cabinet under the sink was open. I had not touched it. A dish towel that had been folded near the stove was now on the counter by the window. Next to it sat a can of ginger ale from my cooler, open, half empty. I went room to room, bathroom empty, small bedroom empty, utility room empty, upstairs loft empty. Nothing looked tossed around, no drawers pulled out, no broken glass, just little shifts that made the place feel used in the 10 minutes I had been on the water. I called Caleb again and got voicemail. I left a message telling him someone had been in the house and that if this was some local friend of his, he needed to call me back immediately. I should have left then, but my truck was blocked in by a fallen limb near the drive. It must have come down in the wind while I was fishing. It was too thick to drag alone without a saw, and the saw was in the shed behind the house. I went to get it before the light got any lower. The shed door stood open. Inside, the chainsaw was gone. That hit me harder than seeing the man in the window. A stranger in a house can still be explained away for a few seconds. A missing tool means he had time. It means he looked around. It means he chose what he wanted. I backed out of the shed and returned to the house, locking both doors this time. I pushed the kitchen table against the back door and took a fireplace poker from beside the wood stove. Storm light settled over the lake, turning the windows black from the outside. My phone caught one bar near the upstairs window, long enough for Caleb to text back. No one should be there. Call 911. The call would not go through. I stayed upstairs where I could see the dock and the yard. At some point after dark, I noticed the boat was no longer tied where I left it. It had drifted 10 feet off the dock, floating sideways. Then I saw why. A figure was sitting low inside it, not fishing, not moving. Just sitting there in my boat close enough to the dock to reach it with one hand. I froze at the window. The person looked up slowly, as if he felt my eyes on him. I could not see his face clearly, only the pale shape of it. He climbed out of the boat and stepped onto the dock. Then, instead of coming to the door, he walked beneath me. A few seconds later, the floor gave a soft thump from underneath the house. I had forgotten there was a Crawlspace access panel near the back steps. The next sound was directly below the kitchen. Another thump, then a slow sliding noise under the boards. He wasn't trying to get in. He was already under me. I went out the upstairs window onto the porch roof, dropped to the yard, and ran for the road with my phone and keys. I left everything else there. A sheriff's deputy drove me back an hour later after Caleb finally reached emergency services for me. They found the chainsaw in the crawlspace, along with the sleeping bag, empty food cans, and my open ginger ale. The man was gone. What still bothers me is what the deputy said after looking under the house with his flashlight. There was a section of insulation pulled aside below the kitchen. From down there, he said, you could look straight up through gaps around the pipes and watch the entire room. Every time someone stood at the sink, cooked at the stove, or walked in from the dock, a person in the crawl space could stand there in the dark and see them first.